Dwarf Fortress is one of those games that you either hate or get so obsessed with you end up tabulating the exact amount of resources needed to construct a working computer in-game. It's renowned for its complexity and depth and sheer insanity. The player base is no small part of this reputation, as stories abound about players pushing the game towards ultimate limits or finding exploits that ruin the game so horrendously they have required intervention by the developer not necessarily on a mechanical basis, but on a moral one. The Mermaid Genocide. If you aren't overly familiar with Dwarf Fortress, here's the most basic possible breakdown. In a randomly generated world with its own history, gods, figures, terrain, and more, you play as a small part of the historical narrative by guiding a group of dwarves out to strike the earth. You must create a colony that is not only self-sufficient for its own needs, but produces surplus value for the purposes of trade, attracting migrants and glorifying yourself. From a humble beginning, scraping food from the ground and living precariously as you struggle to establish a civilization, to a glorious metropolis that leads a civilization and inevitably falls. I've been a dedicated player of Dwarf Fortress for years now, on and off. It's the kind of game that holds my attention periodically but intensely. Its dopamine is delivered in drip doses as years tick on by and projects are complete with an agonizing slowness. I've played versions before branches were on trees, before temples and taverns. I've read the changelogs, and I found them amusing enough.
Added mouths! Added an aperture flag that stops mouths from being gouged out.
But they're not why I play the game. They're just what my friends remember after I rant to them about the game for like 4 hours. Dwarf Fortress's hold on me is kind of difficult to explain. One part of it is that you're not really a god, though the player can be interpreted as the titular Armok to whom Dwarf Fortress is enslaved. You're not a leader, though you set orders and tasks. AI fulfills them or ignores them based on need. The feeling of Dwarf Fortress really isn't that of being in control, but of being in a struggle against a world so complex you aren't a driver of change. You can create a fortress that will stand the test of time, but the test of time doesn't matter when there are constant conflicts between personalities and civilizations. As you watch history unfold, you come to realize that the world is much, much deeper than any one playthrough. When you first generate a world, you are in the age of myth. Gods, necromancers, demons, and angels abound. Great monsters plod across the earth. Primordial beings coughed up like phlegm from the ground. Over time, these fall apart. You fall from the age of myth to the age of heroes to the age of one or two great beings. From there, the age of dwarves, and should fortune fail them, they join the other mythic creatures and only fairy tales remain. The age of fairy tales can fade into the age of man, and that too can fade into the age of death, where all sapient life is gone and their ruins scatter the world. Playing Dwarf Fortress well means killing the fantasy of Dwarf Fortress, quite literally strangling and beating and hacking the limbs off of legends and maintaining your own survival. Each fallen beast, each tamed land is a little bit of magic that gets scoured from the world. My games follow a standard pattern. I embark, I establish farms and a bunch of beds as quick as I can, I make a trade depot far too early, and then I design my fortress around my desire to ensure accommodations are met in excess as quickly as possible. Wine flows, but you eat raw plum helmet mushrooms every day. It's an existence, but not a great one. In the mid-game, I focus on production and industry. I start to carve out floors solely dedicated to the storage and processing of minerals. Well after my fortress is big enough to support 150 so dwarves, the fortress becomes economical and based on the gathering and processing of resources for trade. Every fishbone from the early game is made into dice and toys. Every gem is cut and set into furniture. My military, once a gaggle of men with copper armor and low-quality spears, if that, has become a steel-clad and trained force. I normally pierce the first layer of caves by this point, and the threat of siege or horde beasts descending upon my fortress grows. My ravenous wealth hoarding and extensive trade does not help matters. My fortresses typically collapse 5 or 10 years in. Either I over-specialize, or I ignore a critical part of infrastructure, or a mega beast comes. Despite my on and off years of play, I can't say I'm particularly good at this game. Besides, as the community slogan so often goes, losing is fun. Every loss is a chance to reassess or laugh at your own stupidity. Things slip my mind and a fortress falls. Events beyond my control happen and a fortress falls. Corpses pile high and a fortress falls. Many people are turned off from this game because of its complexity and the expect to lose mantras. And while those are indeed part of why the game is so unique, they're only a part of the reason the game is so unique. Even the most stable, most incredibly meticulously made fortress can fall due to strange moods and invasions, to RNGesus coming down and looking upon your glittering army, whereupon he says, "The forgotten beast Guz Crushmog comes, a spider made of steel, beware its toxic blood, and all your preparations are for fucking naught." This means the type of person who played this game and loves it prepares themselves for all their work to be laid low, with dogged determination to look at vast failure, the loss of dozens of hours, and to say, "Let's do it again." The closest games I play to it are things like Clanfolk and RimWorld. RimWorld even has mental breaks in the loss of colonies to random chance, but the scales are indescribably different. In RimWorld, which I deeply love, 7 colonists is a decent settlement, and you can actually play the game and get the full content with a colony of that size. Dwarf Fortress populations number in the dozens minimum by the first few hours of any given fortress. This scale puts you in the role of observer of history, watching a city grow large and wealthy and falling to its own greed and hubris. If RimWorld is a family drama, Dwarf Fortress is epic fantasy sprawling on the computer screen. It's a history of epics and eras and creatures mythical fading away. Kind of like Lord of the Rings, the elves leaving Middle-earth, magic fading, only with way more booze and someone turned their baby into a cabinet. When your fortress falls, the world is not deleted. You've merely acted out a part of history, one that will be recorded and influence the world forever. That, I think, is ultimately the pull of Dwarf Fortress for me. That's what keeps me tumbling into it year after year. To observe and influence a tiny sliver of history, to see a world evolve and grow past your failures, to play in the same world over and over again, and know that these dwarves are part of something so much larger than their own individual lives, that your fortress's actions and the random chaos of life will butterfly out. Every time you boot up a fortress in the same world, you have left an indelible mark on a story vaster than you. The appeal of Dwarf Fortress comes from it being perhaps the only game I've played where the weight of history is even somewhat simulated. By the time I build my 10th fortress in the same world, it's decades later and history is entirely changed. Heroes and citizens from my previous fortresses are named and recorded. The megabeasts slain will never appear again. The necromancers who cackled as their shuffling zombies consumed my fortress are all the more powerful. My decisions now have relationship and permanence in time. I can view them all whenever I like in Legends mode, which can be a quite humbling experience, seeing dozens of names and locations scroll by, the death dates and birth dates of thousands of beings recorded. It feels heavy in a way that I've never seen a game history feel. Time within video games is often distorted and shortened. Those which take place over decades in reality only take maybe 40 hours to play all the way through. Time is inherently dilated or compressed within video games, and this means very few of them are good at giving a sense of scale. If someone were to make a video game that took place over, say, millions of years, it would be hard to give a sense of time, the vast scale that you are playing through. Even studios famous for their historical stimulation compress the achievements, struggles, and horrors of their centuries into numbers. 25,000 men died here, and 10 years later the same battle site claimed another 25,000 more, and you register this as just an inconvenient manpower shortage. Meanwhile, more personal, intimate games can take place over a few days of in-game time, and a few hours for us, and position their heroes as ultimately the protagonist, central and important above all else, inherently great men who change the course of history. Neither of these approaches is bad per se, but Dwarf Fortress does something special and threads the needle beautifully. The population size is small enough that individual dwarves can have families, lovers, children, friends, rivals. Each one feels like an individual. It's also large enough that it feels like a bustling, moving city of production, and the years tick on by and your community faces and defeats threats or is defeated by them. The recording of history is studious and constant, and each person is named and recorded. Their exploits, kills, adventures, passions, and loves are preserved. You can see history unfold from the vast and grand fortresses sprawling all over maps, to the intimate and tiny details historians dream they had access to, the families of peasantry and the daily lives of those within a fallen civilization. This game is heavy with the sense of history, and it is perhaps one of the few games I feel truly earned the label of epic fantasy. Also, someone made a mod where you can milk gorillas. Not important, not relevant to the video, but extremely funny. I hope the DF community never changes. Thank you for watching.